The rain came down in sheets, relentless and unforgiving, hammering against the forest like the earth itself was trying to wash away her presence. She stumbled, branches whipping across her face, slick mud tugging at her boots, and every step was a struggle against the storm, against the wind that tore at her hair and clothes. Her chest heaved, lungs burning with the effort, and her hands shook as she pressed them against her sides, trying to hold herself upright. Each breath was ragged, shallow, desperate, as if the world itself had conspired to drown her in chaos. The forest was alive with sound, the roar of the wind through the pines, the slap of rain against the leaves, the low, menacing growl of shadows moving just beyond her vision. She knew they were there. She could feel them, sense the way their eyes tracked her, unseen but relentless. Her heart pounded with every step, a frantic drum of fear, guilt, and something deeper. A spark of something she didn't fully understand, a power she couldn't yet control. It stirred inside her, wild and dangerous, a flame threatening to burn out of her chest if she didn't keep moving. Her hands slid along the rough bark of a tree as she tried to catch herself from falling. Her knees scraped against stones hidden beneath the mud, and pain shot through her legs, sharp and unforgiving. She bit back a cry, tasting blood, tasting salt from tears she hadn't even realized she'd started shedding. Every stumble felt like the world mocking her, reminding her that she had always been alone, that she had always been hunted, that she had always been left behind. And in the corner of her vision, shadows moved. Not the shadows of the trees, not the flicker of rain in the dim light. Shadows that breathed, that shifted, that seemed to have teeth and claws hidden just beyond sight. The shifters were coming. They had always been coming. She could feel their hunger, their hatred, and she knew that if she faltered even once, if she let herself fall, it would be the end. She pushed herself harder, the mud sucking at her feet, branches clawing at her arms, rain stinging her face. And through it all, the power within her writhed, angry, confused, a storm inside a storm. It whispered promises she didn't trust, temptations she couldn't follow. It surged when she ran, flaring in her chest, threatening to escape, and she clenched her teeth, praying she could hold it in just a little longer. Her mind raced, memories flashing like lightning across a storm-dark sky. Faces, all the faces that had turned on her. Friends who had betrayed her. Lovers who had abandoned her. Her pack, her family, all the people who should have been there, and hadn't been. The shame was heavy, a wet cloak pressing down on her shoulders. Why did this always happen to her? Why did she always end up on the run, always hunted, always alone? The questions burned as fiercely as the cold rain against her skin. And yet, despite everything, she moved. Step by painful step, she forced herself forward, deeper into the forest where the shadows might hide her, where the wind might carry her scent away from those who would kill her without thought. She stumbled over roots, twisted her ankle, cursed herself under her breath, but she did not stop. Not yet. Not when the power inside her was still alive, still thrumming, still waiting. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a silhouette, distant and fleeting, moving between the trees. She froze, heart lurching, every nerve screaming. Was it them? Had they caught up? Or was it something else? Something she couldn't yet name, something dangerous and alluring and terrifying all at once? She shook her head, trying to push the thought away. There was no time for curiosity. Not now. He had to survive. Rain washed over her face, stinging her eyes, and she blinked rapidly, tasting the metallic tang of blood and fear. Her muscles ached, her lungs burned, and yet she ran. She ran because the alternative, staying, stopping, letting them catch her, was unthinkable. She ran because somewhere deep down, a voice inside her whispered that she could not let herself die, not here, not now, not like this. Branches tore at her clothes, mud soaked her hair, and the wind clawed at her skin, but she pushed on. And then, for the briefest moment, she felt it. The power, a flash of silver fire in her veins, a surge of strength that made her legs move faster, made her hands grip tighter, made her heart beat like a drum of war. She had no control over it, no mastery, but it was hers. And that was enough. For now. The shadows behind her shifted faster. She could hear them now, the low growls, the snapping of twigs, the pounding of claws on earth. They were close. Too close. And yet she did not stop. Not now. Not ever. She pressed herself against the trunk of a massive oak, panting, trying to slow her racing heart, trying to listen. She could hear them moving through the underbrush, hear their rage, their hunger. And for a moment she allowed herself a thought she had not dared in years. What if she did not run? What if she faced them? No. The thought was dangerous, fleeting. She pushed it away. He had to survive. He had to keep running. He had to. Her boots slipped on a slick patch of mud. She fell, sliding across the forest floor, mud and water soaking her clothes, tearing at her skin, and she groaned, pain shooting up her leg. Her hands dug into the earth, trying to find traction, trying to pull herself up. And then through the storm, through the fear, she heard it. A voice. Low, calm, almost impossible to believe in the chaos around her. You shouldn't be here. She froze, every muscle coiling, every instinct screaming at her to run. And yet there was something in the tone, something familiar, something that made her pulse catch and her breath hitch. Not a threat. Not exactly. Something else. Something dangerous and protective and impossible to ignore. The shadows behind her growled again, closer, more urgent. She had to move. But the voice held her in place, a tether stronger than fear. Her eyes searched the darkness, trying to see the source, trying to understand. And then a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the certainty of a predator who knew he owned every inch of this forest. You don't belong here, he said again, and this time she noticed the eyes, golden, piercing, impossible to turn away from, filled with fire and storm and something unspoken. But neither do they. The storm around her raged, the wind tearing through the trees, the rain lashing her face, but in that moment she felt it, a strange, dangerous calm. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, heart still hammering, but there was a thread of hope weaving through the fear. Someone had come. Someone who could fight. Someone who could protect her. And yet, there was a tension in him, a wariness, a hint of darkness lurking beneath the surface. He was not a savior in the traditional sense. He carried demons with him, scars she could not yet see, a history as twisted and dangerous as the forest itself. But she had no choice. She couldn't outrun this storm, these hunters, this fate that clung to her like a shadow. She took a trembling step forward. The mud pulled at her feet. Her ankles screamed in protest. Her hands shook. But she did not fall. Not yet. Not while the fire inside her still burned, wild and unrestrained. And in that moment she realized something she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. Relief. Not safety, not certainty, not peace. But relief. That maybe, just maybe, she would survive the night. Her gaze met his again, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to the space between them. The rain, the mud, the storm, the shadows, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust, fear, hope, danger, desire. All of it tangled together in the space of a heartbeat, impossible to separate, impossible to ignore. And then she remembered the shadows. The enemy was still out there. The danger had not passed. It would not pass. And she knew deep down that this was only the beginning. If you want to hear every heartbeat, every secret, every danger, subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections. The narrator's voice whispered in her mind like a lifeline, like a promise. Because this is only the start of her story. Only the first step into the fire. And with that she pushed herself upright, mud and blood and rain weighing her down, but her legs carrying her forward. The storm screamed around her, the shadows closed in, and the power inside her surged, wild and untamed, a flame refusing to be ignored. And through it all she ran, heart-pounding, breath ragged, into a night that promised nothing but danger, and maybe, just maybe, destiny. The figure stepped forward from the storm-dark forest, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis for a heartbeat. He moved with a predator's grace, every motion precise, deliberate, controlled. Even the wind seemed to bend around him, the rain hesitating for a fraction of a second, as if the storm itself recognized power when it walked. She froze, every muscle tight, every nerve screaming warning and desire at once. He was taller than she remembered men ever being in her nightmares, broader than the forest shadows would allow, and there was a weight in his presence that pressed against her chest, made her lungs ache, made her heart stutter. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice low and magnetic, carrying both command and curiosity, but neither should I. The words rolled off his tongue like a challenge and a confession all at once. They were simple, yet they carried a weight that felt like it could crush her or save her in the same instant. She wanted to run, yet the pull to stay was stronger than the fear that had driven her this far. Her pulse thundered, hammering in her ears, drowning out the rain, drowning out the shouts and growls of unseen enemies closing in. She wanted answers. Why did he know her name? Why did he know she was here? And why did the world seem to bend around him as if he belonged to the storm? Before she could gather herself, a shadow darted from the trees. A jagged shape, impossibly fast, and her body reacted before her mind could process. She turned to flee, but his hand was on her arm, firm and unyielding, and he pulled her behind him with a strength that sent pain shooting through her shoulder. The shadow leapt, claws scraping bark and earth, and he moved like water, faster than thought, intercepting it with a force that was terrifying and beautiful. She barely had time to register the movement before the figure fell to his knees, shoving the attacker away with a speed that blurred his edges, leaving her trembling, drenched and wide-eyed. Her chest rose and fell in rapid bursts. The blood rushing through her ears made it difficult to think. She had never seen someone move like that, strike like that, protect like that, and it scared her. But it scared her in a way that made her pulse spike, made her blood hum, made her skin feel alive for the first time in years. Her fear of the shadows receded just slightly, replaced by the weight of his presence, the magnetic pull of his eyes locking onto hers. "You're hurt," he said, not a question, but a statement layered with observation, concern, and something she couldn't yet name. "How long have you been running?" She swallowed hard, trying to ignore the ache in her ankle, the sting of scratches across her arms, the cold rain seeping into every layer of her soaked clothing. Her throat felt raw, words catching there, and she shook her head slightly. The words were unnecessary. He already knew, she realized. He always knew. "Why are you here?" she managed finally, voice small and uncertain, but carrying the tremor of defiance. "Why are you following me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned slightly, his gaze scanning the forest with a precision that made her stomach twist. Even in the storm, even with the world screaming around them, he was alert, aware, a living weapon, a sentinel. Then he looked back at her and she felt it. The weight of his judgment, the pull of his scrutiny, the curiosity and caution mingling like a storm of its own. "I'm not following you," he said finally. "I'm where I need to be. For reasons you don't understand yet." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't understand. She didn't understand anything about him. And yet, in some way, in the chaotic pulse of fear and rain and shadows, she wanted to. She wanted to understand. She wanted to know why he seemed to hold the storm at bay, why he moved with power that could destroy or protect with the same effortless breath. The shadows that had been pursuing her circled at the edges of the clearing, growls and snapping twigs echoing like a chorus of malice. He stepped in front of her again, and she noticed the subtle shift in his posture. The way his shoulders squared, the slight flare of his chest, the way his fingers flexed like claws ready to strike. His presence was magnetic, yes, but it was also dangerous. She didn't know if he would save her, or if his protection came with a price she couldn't yet pay. "You don't understand what's out there," he murmured almost to himself, almost as if confessing a truth too heavy to voice fully. "And you don't understand what you're capable of. But they do. And they will not stop." Her heart skipped again. She had always felt danger chasing her. She had always known the world was cruel and unforgiving, but now, standing behind him, she realized that danger was only the surface. There were layers to it, layers she had never glimpsed before. And he was at the center of it, part of it, and yet somehow separate. The first memory came unbidden, slicing through her mind like lightning. The pack that had turned against her, the ones who had called her names, the ones who had whispered she was too dangerous to live among them. Faces she had trusted, friends she had bled for, turning their backs, turning on her, labeling her a curse. And yet she had survived. Somehow, despite the betrayals, despite the fear, despite the endless hunt, she had survived. He moved again, swiftly, a flash of motion that made her blink and wonder if she had imagined it. A second shadow lunged from the treeline, and before she could even think, he had intercepted it, throwing it aside with a force that sent mud and rain flying, leaving her standing, stunned, her chest heaving, unsure whether to marvel or recoil. "I've seen what you can do," he said quietly, almost intimately, the words brushing against her like wind over skin. "And you have no idea what you're capable of." She flinched, unsure how to respond. No one had ever seen that in her before. Not like that. Not the way his gaze held her, measuring, recognizing, acknowledging a spark that had been buried beneath years of pain and shame. And yet, even as her pulse raced, fear and something else, something she had buried deep, flickered within her. Desire. Curiosity. The strange, dizzying sense that maybe she could trust him at least a little, even if everything else in the world screamed that she couldn't. A third shadow emerged, larger, teeth glinting in the sparse light, and she instinctively backed up, ankles screaming, body trembling. And again he was there, blocking her, moving with fluid perfection, his hands striking and shoving and controlling the battlefield in a way that made her stomach clench with a mixture of awe and terror. His morality was ambiguous. Yes, he moved like a predator, he struck like a predator. But in that moment she realized she was alive because of him, and the realization was both comforting and dangerous. "You've been running for a long time," he murmured, and there was no judgment in his voice, only an observation. "And yet you still have fire. You still fight. That's rare. She swallowed hard, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. Fire. That word. She had always felt it, always sensed it, but no one had ever acknowledged it. No one had ever seen it as more than a curse. And yet here he was seeing it and somehow, not recoiling. Somehow, recognizing it. Her mind, exhausted and frayed, wandered back to the past again. The betrayals, the whispers, the constant fear. She had been shunned, mocked, cast out. She had learned not to trust. Not to hope. Not to let anyone in. And yet, now, standing in the rain, bruised, battered, terrified, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Safety. Tentative, fragile, incomplete, but there. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally, voice small, almost a whisper drowned by the storm. His eyes met hers and for a heartbeat the world fell away. The shadows, the rain, the pain, all of it faded, leaving only the weight of him, the fire in his gaze, the tension of 1,000 unspoken words. "Because I have to," he said simply. "Because you're not ready to die. And because you're mine whether you want to be or not." The words landed like a blow, sharp and undeniable. She didn't know what he meant and part of her didn't want to. But part of her wanted to understand, wanted to feel it, wanted to follow him even into the storm, even into the danger, even into the unknown. She shivered, rain soaking through her clothes, fear and desire and confusion twisting inside her. And yet she took a step forward, letting the first trace of trust slip into her heart, letting herself feel that spark of hope, that flicker of fire, that dangerous, exhilarating sense that maybe, just maybe, survival was not about running anymore. Maybe survival was about standing beside him, facing the storm together, and discovering what they were capable of when fire met fire, when storm met storm, when hearts, broken and battered, found each other in the chaos. And for the first time in a long time she did not run. Not yet. Not while he stood there, guarding her, challenging her, daring her to step into something greater than fear. The forest roared around them, the rain fell, the shadows circled. But in that moment she felt something else rising. Something dangerous, untamed and infinitely alive. And it called to her, whispering that this night, this storm, this encounter, was only the beginning. The rain had begun to ease, though the forest was still soaked, dripping, alive with the lingering scent of wet earth and moss. She pressed herself against the rough bark of an ancient oak, shivering from the cold, from exhaustion, and from the unsteady surge of something she didn't yet understand inside her chest. Her pulse still raced, not just from the flight but from him, the enigmatic figure who had stepped out of shadows and taken her survival into his hands. And yet, as the echoes of battle faded into the whisper of falling rain, her mind began to wander, spiraling into memories she had tried for years to bury. Faces. Voices. Laughter turned to whispers, whispers turned to scorn. She had been just a girl once, a young wolf learning the edges of power, the weight of blood that ran through her veins like fire. And in that innocence she had been betrayed. Her old pack had seen her differently from the beginning. The moment she had shifted fully for the first time, the moment her silver aura flared like liquid moonlight, they had recoiled, murmuring in shadowed corners. Dangerous. Unstable. A threat. A curse. She remembered the pointed fingers of her peers, the cruel smirks of those she had called friends. "Don't get too close," one had whispered, "she will burn everything she touches." And perhaps she had. The memory of her first accident, the night the small fire had danced along the edges of her fingertips, unbidden, scorching the forest floor, still haunted her. She hadn't meant to. She hadn't wanted to. But it had happened. And in the echo of that night, the pack's mockery had been merciless. She had learned then that her power, magnificent and untamed, was also her cage. He could never trust them. He could never trust anyone. The forest around her was quiet now, the storm leaving only the residual murmur of dripping leaves. She shifted uncomfortably, mud clinging to her soaked clothes, bruises aching along her legs and arms. And she looked at him, the figure who had saved her, who moved with strength and certainty, and yet carried an unspoken burden, and felt a stir of conflict. He was dangerous, yes. Unpredictable, undeniably so. And she could sense the shadows around him, the weight of power he carried that matched her own. But despite the instinct that screamed at her not to trust, that whispered reminders of betrayal and pain, she felt something else. Something fragile yet insistent. Safety. and it frightened her more than the shadows ever had. I can't trust anyone, she thought, letting the words echo inside her like a mantra she had whispered countless times before. Not even him. But why do I feel safe? The question lingered in the air, unanswered as they moved together through the forest. His presence was a constant shield, both protective and oppressive, magnetic and unyielding. Every rustle of leaves made her jump, every distant call of an animal made her flinch, and yet she did not leave his side. Not yet. Not while he existed between her and the storm, between her and the world that had always hunted her. And then another memory hit her, sharp and unbidden. A friend. A sister, she had thought, someone who had smiled with warmth and whispered secrets in the quiet corners of the pack's hall. Someone she had trusted with her life, with her fears, with her fledgling control of her own dangerous power. And that friend had betrayed her. Turned on her in the moment of greatest vulnerability, joining the chorus of scorn, whispering her downfall to the leaders of the pack. The memory made her shiver, made her body tighten with old pain and new tension. She had learned to run from that pain, to bury it beneath layers of control and silence. But standing there in the forest, wet and trembling, the memories surged up with a force that almost unseated her. She had been abandoned so many times, left to fend for herself against powers she didn't yet understand, against enemies she couldn't see until they were almost upon her. And now here he was, watching her, guarding her, knowing more than she was willing to admit to herself that she feared. Her steps were hesitant, careful as the forest floor shifted beneath her. Every leaf slick with rain, every branch reaching out like a warning. And she caught herself glancing at him often, studying the angles of his face, the tension in his shoulders, the sharp glint in his eyes that could cut or caress with equal ease. His gaze was unyielding, unwavering, and it unsettled her in ways she did not yet understand. He was moving with a purpose now, leading her deeper into the forest, his steps sure, precise, almost ceremonial. She followed, torn between instinct to flee and a desire she could not name. They came to a clearing eventually, a space that seemed almost untouched by the storm. The air hummed with a strange energy, and her skin prickled as if the forest itself recognized her presence. And that's when she saw it. A relic ancient and glowing faintly beneath the storm-darkened sky. Twisted trees formed a natural arch above it, roots curling like fingers, leaves whispering secrets in the wind. Carvings ran along the relic's surface, runes shimmering faintly, pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Her pulse accelerated, her breath catching in her chest. She had seen relics before, in whispers, in stories, in half-forgotten legends, but nothing like this. This was alive. He stepped forward, hesitant, hands brushing against the relic with reverence. "This is old," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Older than the first pack. Older than memory." Her fingers twitched, drawn to it, pulled as if by gravity. She reached out, brushing the surface lightly, and the moment her skin made contact, visions flooded her mind. Silver flames danced across her chest, wild and untamed. Shadows moved and twisted, bowing before her, whispering her name in languages she didn't recognize. Blood, fire, light, all mingled in a torrent of sensation, leaving her breathless, trembling, awestruck. "You're the child of the flame," he whispered, eyes wide, almost afraid, but with a tinge of awe. They spoke of you in whispers, in warnings. I never thought it could be true." Her mind reeled, heart hammering, body trembling. Child of the flame. Chosen. Destiny. She had heard the stories growing up, legends whispered in shadowed corners of the pack halls. A girl born once in a generation, powerful beyond measure, capable of shaping the pack's future or shattering it entirely. He had never believed she was that girl. She had only believed she was a mistake, a danger, a burden. And yet now, with the relic glowing beneath her fingertips, with visions flashing across her mind, with the magnetic pull of his gaze on her, she could feel it. The truth in her veins, the fire in her blood. She was more than a survivor. She was more than an outcast. She was power incarnate, a force that even the shadows feared. I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, voice trembling, but a spark of defiance ignited within her. "I don't know if I can control it. Control myself." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the sharp scent of him in the air, a mixture of storm, earth, and something wild, untamed, primal. No one ever is, he said quietly, almost a confession. But it doesn't matter if you're ready. The world doesn't wait for readiness. And neither do I. Her pulse quickened, heart hammering not just from fear, but from the unspoken connection that thrummed between them. Her hand remained on the relic, visions of fire still flickering behind her eyelids. I've been running, she admitted, voice barely audible. Running from myself. Running from everyone. Running from the fire inside me. But I thought it would kill me if I let it out. He tilted his head, studying her as if weighing her very essence, as if seeing the fragments of fear, pain, desire, and defiance that made her whole. The fire isn't something that kills, he said. It's something that chooses. And it chose you. You've already survived the impossible. Don't tell me you can't survive this. The weight of his words pressed against her chest, strange, heavy, and oddly comforting. Her gaze drifted down to the relic, fingers tracing the runes as visions continued to dance across her mind. She saw flashes of power, her hands glowing silver, shadows bending, wolves bowing, the forest itself trembling. And somewhere within it all she saw him, watching her, waiting, challenging her, and yet, trusting her. For the first time in her life, fear was mixed with awe, panic intertwined with possibility, desperation shadowed by hope. She realized then, trembling, breathless, that she had not only survived until this moment, but she was being called to something far greater than survival. Something that demanded her fire, her strength, her heart, and perhaps, her trust. She turned to him, eyes wide, vulnerable, unguarded, and whispered almost to herself, I don't know if I can do this, but maybe I have to. And he nodded, the storm around them fading into silence, the relic glowing faintly in their shared space, and the forest waiting, holding its breath for what was to come next. The forest was no longer serene. The calm reverence of ancient trees and glowing runes had shifted to an edge of danger, the air trembling with tension, the leaves whispering in warning. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a threat. Her pulse surged, not with awe this time but with the raw, jagged pull of fear. Something had sensed her, something beyond the storm, beyond her control. And as the first shapes emerged from the mist, she understood she was not safe. Not yet. They came like a tide of darkness, rogue wolves slinking between twisted roots, eyes gleaming with malice, teeth bared in hunger and spite. Some were packless, others dressed in the authority of descent, their claws leaving shallow gouges in the mud, their growls a promise of pain. And then the shadows. Creatures of whispered legend, half seen in the corners of memory, sinewy forms that moved with uncanny speed, snarling with intent she could not yet comprehend. Her chest tightened, breath shallow, every instinct screaming to flee. He stepped in front of her, towering, tense, every movement sharp and decisive, a barrier of muscle and resolve. Stay behind me, he ordered, voice low, a growl threaded through it, not just for effect but as a shield, a warning to those who would challenge him. She obeyed, though her muscles quivered, heart hammering like war drums in her chest. They told me to warn you, one of the dissenters snarled, voice dripping with venom. 'Tis Alpha. Will you side with her, or with us? The weight of the words pressed against him, but his eyes never wavered from her. For a fraction of a second she glimpsed the storm beneath his calm, a hurricane of conflict, of loyalty, of choices that could change everything. And beneath it all, there was an acknowledgement that he did not just protect her because he must, but because in some unspoken way she mattered. The first clash erupted like lightning. A rogue wolf lunged, claws outstretched. She froze, instinctive terror colliding with the strange, flickering power inside her. And then the silver flames danced, unbidden, untamed, along her fingertips, bright sparks of light and heat that seared the rain-soaked air. The attacker yelped, retreating with a howl of surprise, and she staggered back, eyes wide. She didn't understand it fully yet, she barely controlled it, and the effort left her breathless, trembling. He moved with precision, intercepting another attacker with a swipe of his arm, muscles coiled like a panther, movements lethal yet measured. And all around her, the forest became a battleground, shadows twisting, claws striking, silver flames flickering, her heart beat loud against the chaos. She wanted to run, she wanted to hide, but her power, wild and unpredictable, surged through her like a river she could not dam. You're stronger than they think, he said briefly, almost a breath against her ear as he deflected a claw aimed for her shoulder. But don't lose control. Not yet. Her pulse spiked, fear and adrenaline tangled into something that made her lightheaded, almost dizzy. She tried to remember the legends, the stories of the child of the flame, the warnings of what she could become, but there was no time. Only survival. Only the clash of teeth, the crack of branches, the hiss of shadows and the roar of her own awakening. And then it happened. The rogue pack surged, a coordinated attack that forced her to step back, to stagger, to feel the cold press of mud and rain against her skin. He pushed her behind him, deflecting strikes, his teeth bared, a low growl vibrating in his chest. "You have to run," he shouted, but the words barely reached her, swallowed by the chaos. A particularly large shadow lunged at her from the tree-line. Reflexively, her hand flared with silver fire, catching it across the chest, sending it reeling with a howl that pierced the night. She staggered back, chest heaving, mind screaming, heart pounding, not just from fear, but from the raw power coursing through her. She was alive, yes. But she felt something else. A spark of terror, yes, but also exhilaration. This was who she was. This was what she could do. And she hated it. And yet, part of her loved it. He glanced at her, that intense gaze softening for a fraction, and she caught the unspoken acknowledgement. She had survived, she had fought, she had not broken. And that meant something. It meant that maybe, just maybe, she could stand beside him in this chaos. Not behind him, not as prey, but as someone necessary, someone dangerous, someone alive. But the battle was not yet over. A new surge of attackers came, larger, more organized, their growls slicing through the damp air. And then came the order from the dissenters, harsh and final: "Leave her, or we will end both of you. Choose now." His jaw tightened. His body tensed, and she could see the inner struggle: loyalty to the pack, instinct to protect, the pull of destiny versus the cost of attachment. The moment stretched, a knife edge suspended in the rain-soaked night, and then, the decision came. He pushed her back further, low growl escaping his throat. "Go. Run. I will find you. I swear it." Her heart twisted. Survival felt like betrayal. She wanted to protest, to stay, to fight, but instinct and fear of losing him forced her legs into motion. She ran, stumbling through mud and roots, tears mixing with rain, breath ragged, mind a swirl of grief and panic. He did not follow. Not yet. But she could feel his presence in every heartbeat, in every shadow, in every pulse of power that echoed through the forest. And then, just as the forest swallowed her, she glimpsed his silhouette against the rain-lit canopy, one final, steadfast figure standing against impossible odds. And the unspoken promise hung between them: survival. They would both survive. Somehow. Some way. Hours later, the chaos faded, leaving only whispers of tension in the still damp forest. She had found a small hollow, a hidden nook between twisted roots and fallen trunks. Exhausted, shaking, soaked to the bone, she finally collapsed. And then she heard it. The soft, deliberate approach of steps that were not threatening, that were careful, aware. He appeared again, this time closer, his wet cloak clinging to his frame, face shadowed but eyes fixed on her. There was no battle now, only the quiet hum of aftermath, only the lingering pulse of what had happened. And he sat beside her, close enough to be warmth but not too close to demand trust she could not yet give. "You shouldn't have come back," she said softly, voice still raw from shouting, from running, from fear. "You should have stayed away. You could have left me." His lips curved, almost a smirk, but softened by something tender. "And miss seeing you survive?" "Impossible." The hollow was quiet, only the drip of rain from leaves above and the low hum of distant storm. And for the first time since the chase began, she let herself breathe. His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. She wanted to pull back, to hide, to retreat, but part of her wanted to reach, to touch, to trust, if only for a moment. "I've never trusted anyone," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Not really. And I can't. No. I can't even begin to trust you." His gaze softened, unwavering. "I see you," he said, quiet but steady. "All of you. The fear, the fire, the shadows, the scars. And I don't care. That's not something you offer lightly. But, oh wait. If you'll let me." Her breath caught. The storm inside her mind, inside her chest, wavered between instinct to flee and instinct to stay. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel that safety again, even if it terrified her to trust someone so completely. They tended each other's minor wounds in silence, the small acts of care heavy with unspoken meaning. She brushed mud from his shoulder. He pressed a cloth to a shallow cut on her arm. The intimacy of touch, of care, of shared vulnerability was dizzying. The forest around them faded into background, leaving only them, the warmth of the fire he coaxed to life from wet wood, the quiet hum of their shared breathing. She looked up at him, lips parted, heart hammering. He leaned closer, eyes dark, intense, magnetic. She felt it. The pull, the desire, the simmering tension that had been building since the forest first swallowed them both. And then, just as their faces drew closer, rain and firelight flickering across their features, the distant howl of a rogue wolf reminded them both that the world was not yet safe. Her pulse raced. Trust and fear, desire and caution, hope and doubt, all mingling into a single unbearable tension. Can I truly trust you?" she whispered. His eyes softened, almost vulnerable, almost human in that rare moment of openness. "That's a choice only you can make. But know this. I would wait as long as it takes. And I'll never turn my back on you. Not again." And in that hollow beneath the storm-tossed trees, amid the smoke, mud and shadows, she realized something terrifying and thrilling. Maybe she could. Maybe she could trust him. Maybe, just maybe, they could face the world together. The forest that had seemed alive with promise and power now felt different. Heavy, oppressive, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the next blow. She had thought for a fleeting moment by the fire, that there was sanctuary here. That even in a world that had always cast her aside, that had hunted her, that had whispered that she was dangerous and broken, there might exist a space where she was safe. But safety, she was learning, was a fragile illusion. It began with a whisper, soft at first, drifting on the wind through the hollow. She shouldn't be here. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. A shadow of betrayal she had thought she'd left behind. Her heart slammed against her ribs and she froze. Her pulse was loud in her ears, the warmth of his presence now tinged with alarm. "Who's there?" she demanded, voice sharp despite the tremor in it, hands trembling as she clenched them around the fire-warmed cloth she'd been using to tend her scratches. From the shadows emerged a figure she had trusted once, a friend she had counted on, the one who had laughed with her, cried with her, and shared secrets meant for no one else. But the smile on their lips now was twisted, eyes glinting with malice, teeth bared in the dim firelight. "You've been hiding, haven't you?" the figure hissed. "Hiding your power. Hiding your secret. But they'll all see it now." Her stomach dropped. The betrayal came like a blade she hadn't felt until it pierced her. Her hand trembled. Why are you here?" Her voice was a whisper, broken, raw, disbelief pooling in her chest like ice water. "Because they want to see you burn," the traitor said and stepped forward, revealing a glint of something metallic, sharp. The firelight reflected off it, making her heart stutter. "And I'm happy to oblige." He moved instantly, her mysterious alpha, the one she had begun to trust despite every instinct warning her against it. His form blurred with speed and precision, placing himself between her and the threat. "Stay behind me," he growled, voice low, resonant with something almost feral. But even as he defended her, the tension in his posture betrayed the impossible choice he faced. He could fight them all, yes, but what would happen if he did? Her power stirred in response. Not fully under her control, not entirely disciplined, but alive, thrumming in her veins like wildfire. She felt it rise, silver flames flickering along her fingertips, her aura shimmering against the shadows, and yet fear gripped her. She could feel the pulse of betrayal like a drum in her chest. Could she trust herself not to destroy what little sanctuary they had carved together? And then the words came, sharp, cruel, slicing through the charged air. "Your power will destroy us," the traitor spat. "We warned you, all of us. And now, it's time for the world to see why you were exiled." She recoiled, chest heaving, tears mingling with rain and sweat on her face. Her mind flashed back, shards of old memories, old betrayals, the pack that had cast her out, the friends who had turned their backs, the fear that had followed her from the very beginning. And now here it was again, biting, relentless, impossible to ignore. She choked, voice breaking. I'm not." Her words dissolved into the rising tension around her, into the growls, the snapping of claws against the dirt, the hiss of enemies circling closer. She could see the fear in the eyes of the rogue wolves, the eagerness for her destruction, and yet, intertwined with that, a strange fascination as if they were drawn to her flame even as they hated it. He watched her, unwavering, but she could see it, the tension tearing at him from every side. His posture was poised, ready to strike, but not reckless. The betrayal was not just external, it cut at him too. If he intervened fully, would it make her enemy or ally? Could he allow her to fight, or would he risk everything to shield her? And then, with a breath that trembled between fury and fear, she acted. The silver flame erupted along her arms, not in control, not precise, but beautiful, terrifying, unstoppable. It cast dancing shadows across the forest floor, illuminating the fear, the doubt, the betrayal, the longing. The rogue wolves yelped, retreating for a moment as her power flared in response to the threat, a reflection of every wound she had ever carried, every betrayal, every moment she had been left to fend for herself. The traitor froze, eyes wide, realizing too late the magnitude of what she had become. "No, this isn't possible." "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling raw with pain and fury. "This is me, and I will not be your sacrifice." He moved then, swift and precise, deflecting strikes, protecting her from a swipe that would have torn her shoulder. His voice cut through the chaos, low, steady, commanding. "Focus. Control it. Don't let them take you." And yet, the moment was fleeting. A larger threat emerged. A coordinated strike from the dissenters, the shadows closing in, claws and teeth aimed to end her life before she could fully understand her power. And in that instant, chaos reigned. She had to run, had to flee, had to escape before she could be consumed by both the enemy and the uncontrolled fire within her. He shouted her name, voice cracking with tension and raw emotion. "Go. Survive. I will find you." And she ran, heart hammering, lungs burning, every step a struggle against both fear and the magnetic pull that kept drawing her toward him even as distance forced them apart. The forest twisted around her, roots catching her boots, mud sucking at her movements, and yet she pushed forward, driven by a combination of survival and the strange, dangerous hope that he would not abandon her. Behind her she could hear the clash, the growls, the shouts. She couldn't look back, not yet. Not until she had distance, not until she had breath, not until she could process the searing betrayal that had struck closer than any enemy ever had. Hours later she found a hidden clearing. The storm had passed, leaving the forest dripping and hushed, a fragile calm that felt temporary, unreal. She sank to the ground, trembling, tears flowing freely, the weight of the night pressing down on her shoulders. Her chest heaved with the effort of survival and the ache of heartbreak. And then, just as she closed her eyes, attempting to gather the fragments of her strength, she felt it again. A presence, careful, deliberate, and yet unavoidable. He was there, silently observing, keeping distance yet close enough that she could sense the warmth radiating from him. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered, voice raw, fragile, almost broken. I can't." He knelt beside her, eyes soft, unwavering. "I couldn't stay away," he admitted, voice low, intimate, full of something she hadn't expected, honesty, vulnerability, and an unspoken promise. "No matter what happens, I'll find you. I'll protect you. Not because I have to, because I choose to." Her breath caught. The weight of betrayal, the fire of her power, the shadow of grief and fear, all collided inside her chest. And yet, beneath it all, there was a spark, a trembling, fragile ember of trust. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let him in. But the scars ran deep, the betrayals still raw. I don't know if I can trust anyone," she whispered almost to herself. "Not really, not even you." His gaze softened, almost tender, almost human. "Trust is not given lightly," he said. "I know. And I don't ask for it. Not yet. But I'll wait. For as long as it takes." For a long moment, they sat together in the quiet, surrounded by dripping leaves and shadows, the aftermath of chaos pressing against the edges of their awareness. The fire of the forest storm had passed, but the storm within them, within her, raged on. And in that storm a seed was planted. A fragile, trembling seed of something dangerous, something intimate, something that could either save them both, or destroy them entirely. And in the stillness she realized, fear and betrayal had shaped her, yes. But so had power. So had fire. So had the possibility of connection, of trust, of hope. And despite everything, despite the world that had tried to break her, She felt something she hadn't in years. A fragile glimmer of belonging. The night air shivered as she returned to the forest clearing, her boots striking the mud with purpose, her chest heaving with both fear and resolve. The wind had picked up, whipping the trees into frenzy, leaves swirling like fragments of a storm-tossed soul. She could hear the distant snarls, the low growls of the rogue wolves, and the mutterings of dissenting pack members who had thought her defeated, who had thought they had broken her. They had been wrong. Every step carried weight. Every heartbeat carried fire. She felt it coursing through her veins, not a flicker this time, not a trembling ember, but a roaring inferno that demanded recognition. The silver flame within her pulsed with power she had never truly understood until this moment. Every nerve alight, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to release. And as she emerged from the shadows, the first of her enemies glimpsed her, and the world seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Eyes widened, mouths fell open in disbelief, and in that brief moment she realized the truth. She was no longer the hunted. He was the storm.